wandering up our neighbor's driveway right now. You can see the high tunnel that we share behind me there. The pond off to the side. That's where we've been using some water for irrigation for the high tunnel, but we tried to set up rainwater collection off of our neighbor's barn. That's been working pretty well, but it's been dry. It hasn't been raining all that much, but there's a little spring up in the hill. I want to take a look at that and think about a little strategy. Right now the spring is draining down to the road pretty assertively. I'd like to see if we can dam it up just a little bit so we can reload some of our water catching systems with some spring water. And I thought I'd take you folks along if you're interested, so stick around. This is the rainwater system we set up last summer, and overall it's functioning really nicely. This is the north side of a pretty big amount of barn roof area, and there's 6 IBC totes. They hold roughly 300 gallons apiece, so it's shy of 2,000 total gallons of storage. Right now they're half full, so there's about maybe 800 gallons or so of water, and this just lines up in series and then follows this black line all the way back down the driveway and over to the high tunnel. But we haven't had a lot of rain. Yesterday we got maybe a 1/4 inch at most. They got a little bit of water, but not a whole lot. And so I'm wondering, is there some way that we can sneak water into these from the landscape in between rains? Because we are not going to be getting rain for quite a while. Upslope of the barn is a ditch. You can see the barn. It's the south side of the barn. And our neighbor dug this ditch out because there's so much water in here year round that it was actually causing issues for the foundation of the barn. It was wet and it would freeze and start to cause lifting of the cement pad in there. So it needed to be let out. The water needed to go. And so this channel was dug out and it goes around. I'll walk in a little bit and show, but it follows down and then dumps out to the road. During the winter, it's rushing all the time. But in the spring, even though it hasn't rained in a bit, well, it rained yesterday, but not a substantial amount, there is water seeping out. You can see right here, it's not a huge amount, but there's a little bit of a flow to it. And so there's a subtle spring in here somewhere. In fact, I think there's a few little points, maybe I would call them weeps rather than springs. It's not gushing drinking water, but there's a fair bit of water slowly expressing from the hillside into this. But since this right now just drains to the road, how would we even get water from here? I'm just walking down along this trench, and somewhere right around here, you can see it's opened up again, and this is where it continues on. It ultimately follows down through here, past our gardens, past air prune boxes, and down to the road. And I checked in with my neighbor about it, and he was open to the idea. I just started sketching this the tiniest bit. I'm going to do a little bit more now. But you can see I took some of the clay soil from when the trench was cut. That he put all of the material nearby, and I used the shovel to pack in just a little bit of a retention berm right here. And already there's more water available. Now, I wouldn't want to make it so tall or create an issue where now all of a sudden water's backing up and influencing the barn and hurting it. But I would suspect if we made a dam pretty much flush up to the grass line here, it would allow a backup of maybe a few thousand gallons of water to slowly fill this whole area. And we've got good sun here, so we could set up a solar panel right nearby and take this excess water and pull it out with a bilge pump and send it over to those tanks and recharge them. So even though we're not getting rain, there's groundwater that if we were to retain it just a little bit with a simple human scale dam, we should be able to get quite a bit of water out of this. So I've just been adding a couple of shovelfuls here or there of clay-y soil with the shovel. This is a very simple human scale project to create this berm, and since there's deposition material nearby, I can just kind of pick around for that which looks like the clayiest with the least stones, so we have the best impounding material. There's a fair bit in here of some pretty clayey stuff. And I think the work for today is to simply build the berm most of the way up, let it rest for a day or two, and see just how much water is actually retained in here. If I go down in here, you can kind of see. The water line can come up to here now, which, depending on how you can visualize it, translates into quite a bit of extra volume of holding water. The spring loads into here very slowly and steadily, so now it's a waiting game. Been working on stuff for the last few days, but had a chance to come back and check on how this is working, and a couple observations are going on. One, there's certainly more water up slope from where that dam, quote unquote, was put. Very, very clearly the dam is leaking. I mean, it makes sense. I just did it by hand with a shovel, but there's lots of water down here, so we're not capturing nearly as much water as we could upslope. And you can tell because when I walk on it, that is some gooshy manoosh, as they say technically. So I think it would need to be, the dam itself would need to be thicker. That feels actually very nice on the toe, I'll tell you that much. But if this were to come down a bit more and definitely come up a bit more, it would hold more water. Showing this to my neighbor, he got excited about this whole concept, and I think what we'll end up doing is using this as a proof of concept and then committing to using his machine. He's got a little backhoe on a tractor, and we can cut this, take all this material out and send it to gardens, and take this area and go quite a bit deeper, put a bunch of material here and pack it down with the bucket of the machine. Could do all that by hand, but that might be an ounce or two of diesel in an hour instead of a couple of days. And he's satisfied that there's not going to be water upslope against his barn if we were to impound this in here. So even without rains, there's no incoming water, but clearly there's enough weeping from the hill that I should be able to start figuring out. You can, ooh, that is cold. Yep, spring water. That's the formal way to test. Plunge a toe in, and if it gives you the shivers, it's spring water. But yeah, clearly the dam will need to be packed much tighter, be thicker and taller. And so now what I'm going to do is figure out using our simple in the field rig of an old solar panel. We've talked about this before, taking locust staves. It's just a heavy duty screw that goes through the top of the panel here into a block of wood. You can see the screw sticking out. Very, very janky, but it works. So that gives us a legs, and then converted the plug into Anderson, which I'll talk about someday, but you can search Anderson power pole if you're interested in this. And that's just old lamp cord wire that attaches to a bilge pump. In this case, we're using an 800 gallon per hour bilge pump, $25 thing. That'll go in the water, and I'll see if I can get the hose, how far the hose will run. I suspect it won't get all the way over to our tanks, but let me set that up. The length of hose from that little ditch only gets us to here, so I've got a little trick to make some extension on this. I'll set that up and show you what I'm talking about. So often there's old hoses laying around, which is great for a project like this. So I've got one old hose that's cut off and another old hose. How do I pair them together? Maybe I just hold it like that indefinitely. But wait, there's a better way. Turns out most garden hose is 5/8 inch internal diameter, 5/8 ID. And if you get 3/4 inch ID, it's a heavier duty hose. So we found this on the side of the road, and trimmed out, it can be a sleeve that slides over one side and the other, and with the low pressure of the bilge pump, it's good enough to make a seal. In some ways it's not a big deal at all, but for me that was a game changer to realize I don't have to buy bits for all this stuff. I can just get smaller hose and bigger hose from dumpsters or on the side of the road and mate them together. This, you could do better to slide it in further. This is only about that far and that far. If it was a high pressure system, I'm sure it would leak, but you could also tape this, or maybe bicycle inner tubes that have holes could be wrapped around there for security. But that should be good enough for us to plug in the pump and see if it can get water from that ditch up into the tanks. Plug that in. That's what I love about the Anderson power poles. They don't care if they get wet. They're really nice, sturdy, simple plugs. Anyway, bilge pump is on. You can see it definitely needs to be dug deeper. It's already a little shallow for that. I'm gonna have to turn it on its side. This will have to get dug out by hand if we're not gonna do it with the machine. Has to go deeper. No leaks at the junction. That's cool. This doesn't help things much. That's the sound I like to hear. This hose has been laying around for quite a while, so we'll let that run for a minute. But there we go. impounded spring water from up the hill with being transferred through a hose that would no longer, this wouldn't work as a garden hose anymore, but certainly works as a way to transfer. So can the pump with the solar lift up and in? Sure can. Another simple trick with these is to weave the hose through the frame of the tank so that it doesn't wiggle all over, and then keep it really high in the tank. I don't think I'm gonna have this issue this time, but if I were to fill these tanks and the hose was all the way at the bottom, when we turn the pump off, it'll stack a siphon and it would empty the tanks just as well as it filled them. So hose is always at the top of the tanks. And there it is, proof of concept, kind of legit. It will lift with the solar panel that we have, the old Bilge Pump, 800 gallon per hour, and dumpstered hoses into our rain tank. So we can recharge this water battery off of an impounded spring, and then when there's rain, we can certainly let it infill that way. That's my preference, but we might as well grab that water before it gets to the road. I have a feeling there's not gonna be a whole lot more water in there to grab right now, but knowing that the effort put forward with the machine to make this, maybe we'll get it to about that wide, maybe not as wide on this side, but more volume there, and certainly much, much deeper. Maybe even a old metal barrel with some holes at the bottom. The pump can go into that as a little bit of a pre-filter. But it's a deceiving amount of water. It's not very much right there, but there's a fair bit upslope. So proof of concept is legitimate. I think that's the end of this video for now. We'll do an update when we actually do the machine work and have it settle, have an impoundment here, and just see how much water we can grab from basically free water that's on its way to the road. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns or comments, as per usual. Thanks for watching. Cleaver toe. Another formal term.